It's not about dogmas. It's about the search that never ends. If this journey is yours too, consider liking and subscribing. That way, we move forward together, without churches, but with soul, towards something greater than ourselves. You spend your whole life searching for something deeper, meaning, clarity, a feeling that life is more than routines and noise. But what if the thing you've been looking for is already here? Not later, not after a breakthrough, not in a temple, a ritual, or a perfect moment. Right here, right now, in the ordinary. William James said that the most powerful spiritual experiences don't come from outside. They happen when your mind finally stops filtering the world, and the ordinary becomes impossible to ignore. Krishnamurti went even further. He said the truth shows itself only when you stop chasing it, when you stop demanding a path and start seeing what's directly in front of you. This video is about that, about the sacred you keep stepping over, the presence you overlook every day, the revelation that only appears when you stop searching for revelations. By the end of this video, you won't learn a new technique, you won't discover a hidden doctrine, you won't get a spiritual shortcut. You'll get something far more dangerous, a new way of seeing, a way that turns the simplest moment into something quietly extraordinary. And here's the part no one tells you. The sacred doesn't hide from you. You hide from it. Let me show you what you've been missing. You keep searching for meaning, as if it's hiding somewhere far away. But most of what you call depth is already happening around you. You just don't know how to notice it. We're trained to believe that effort brings revelation. So you push, analyze, meditate, chase insight. But this push often closes the door you're trying to open. Expectation becomes the first blindfold. You imagine the sacred as something dramatic, a shock, a vision, a rush. When reality shows up quietly, you walk right past it. Routine builds the second blindfold. Familiarity numbs perception, not because life is empty, but because you've stopped seeing it with fresh eyes. Krishnamurti warned, the moment you want an experience, you distort it. Desire makes you compare the moment with the image in your head, and the image always wins. You also block depth by living in anticipation. You're not in the moment, you're evaluating it, waiting to see if it gives you something. Presence can't survive under conditions. Control is another barrier. You want revelation, but on your terms, predictable, clean, safe. But anything sacred arrives only when the mind stops rearranging everything it touches. Even silence becomes noise when you try to force it. You sit still, but inside, you're negotiating with yourself, waiting for a result. That isn't stillness. It's tension with better posture. William James noticed that mystical openings often happen when the will weakens, when effort drops, when the mind finally releases its grip. That's when the ordinary becomes luminous again. So you're not failing to find the sacred, you're interfering with it. Not intentionally, but through habit and expectation. And until you learn to see without demanding, comparing, or controlling, you'll keep stepping over the very thing you've been trying to find.
William James noticed something most people never realize. Mystical insight doesn't come from escaping the world. It comes from perceiving the same world differently. Not a new place, not a new reality, but a new sensitivity. For him, the shift wasn't mystical in the supernatural sense. It was perceptual, a loosening of the grip, when the mind stops filtering every moment through anxiety, expectation, and habit. James saw that most people don't lack depth, they lack space. Their consciousness is too narrow, too clenched, too occupied. When it relaxes, even a simple object becomes strangely alive. He called these moments noetic, a strange certainty that can't be explained, only felt. Not a vision, not an idea, a quiet knowing. And here's the surprising part. These moments often appear during ordinary tasks: washing a dish, walking home at dusk, sitting in silence without meaning to. The sacred leaks through the cracks of routine. James observed that when the will relaxes, a kind of openness appears, a softness, a temporary suspension of the ego's constant demands. And in that softness, perception becomes wider. This is why mystical states are often short. They don't rely on effort. They arrive when effort collapses, when you stop pushing, when the mind momentarily lets go of its obsession with control. James described them as transient, but not trivial. They leave a trace, a sense that the world is far more than your routines allow you to experience. The world doesn't change in these moments, you do. Something inside stops resisting, and for a brief instant, everything feels both familiar and new at the same time. This shift, this widening of perception, is what most people call mystical. But for James, it was simply human, a natural capacity we forget how to access. And the tragedy is that we assume this depth is rare, when in reality it's constantly trying to reach us, but we're too busy, too tense, too distracted to notice.
You keep expecting meaning to arrive wrapped in intensity, something loud, dramatic, impossible to miss, but the ordinary has been whispering to you for years. And if you stay here with me for a moment, you'll start noticing why you've never heard it. You call the everyday empty because you only see the surface of things, a routine, a wall, a street, a room. But the surface is only empty when your mind is somewhere else. When you're distracted, even light loses its depth. But stay with this thought, because it's about to go somewhere you didn't expect. Most people don't realize how much of their perception is consumed by noise, plans, worries, predictions, rehearsed conversations, a constant internal storm. And in the middle of that storm, the ordinary doesn't stand a chance. It's not that life is flat, it's that you're not actually here to see it. You think the mundane is boring, but boredom is often just the inability to stay long enough with something simple. The mind wants stimulation, novelty, control. It doesn't want presence. Presence feels too raw, too unprotected, too honest. But hold on, this discomfort is exactly the doorway. The ordinary feels empty because you're always 1 second ahead of yourself, mentally checking out, drifting into fantasies, imagining outcomes, avoiding moments that feel too still. You don't see the world, you skim it, and you've been doing this for so long that skimming feels like living. But here's the twist. The ordinary becomes sacred precisely when you stop trying to escape it. When you let the moment be plain, unpolished, imperfect. When you stop demanding that life entertains you and start letting it reveal itself. And trust me, it reveals more than you think. Krishnamurti insisted that observation without judgment is the beginning of intelligence. Not analysis, not interpretation, just seeing. Pure contact with what is here. And even if that sounds abstract. Soon, you'll understand how physical, how real, how tangible this can become. You're distracted not because you're weak, but because distraction became a survival strategy. Looking directly at the ordinary means looking directly at yourself, and sometimes the quiet honesty of the moment is more confronting than any crisis. But this is where everything starts to shift, when you finally allow the world to reach you without filtering it through fear, expectation, or speed. A sense of depth begins to return. The same room, the same object, the same silence feels different. You'll see why soon. It's not the ordinary that's empty, it's your attention that's exhausted. When attention wakes up, even a simple movement of light feels meaningful. Even a breath feels anchored. Even a shadow feels alive. And once that happens, you can't go back to the old way of seeing. And here's the beautiful part you weren't expecting. Nothing needs to change in your life for this shift to happen. Not your job, not your routine, not your surroundings. Only your way of looking. And once that door cracks open, it doesn't close easily. So stay with this feeling, because what comes next is even deeper. The moment where revelation happens without you trying to reach it, when perception opens on its own. And that's where we're headed. You've been taught to believe that revelation is something you produce, something you reach through effort, discipline, or spiritual technique. But the most profound shifts arrive when you stop trying to make them happen. Some moments only open when your mind finally stops fighting its own silence. Not when you meditate perfectly, not when you repeat a mantra, but when something inside you gets tired of holding everything together and releases its grip without your permission. Revelation doesn't respond to pressure. The more you try to force clarity, the more your mind contracts. And a contracted mind can't see truth. It can only see its own tension. Stay with this for a second. It's about to get clearer than you expect. There's a reason why the most meaningful insights come at strange times. Washing a dish, lying on the floor, staring at a wall after a long day. It's not randomness. It's the absence of resistance. When the will weakens, perception widens, not because the world changes, but because you stop reorganizing reality according to your fears, goals, and narratives. And that's when something simple becomes disarmingly honest. This is why revelation often feels like a quiet interruption, a soft but undeniable shift, almost as if the moment itself is speaking. And if that sounds poetic, wait until you see how physical it actually is. Because the truth doesn't arrive intellectually, it arrives sensorially. A change in the light, the way a sound hits your chest, the sudden stillness of your breath. Your body recognizes what your mind keeps missing. And the more you allow this kind of openness, the less revelation depends on you. It begins to happen on its own. The moment your internal commentary loses momentum, even if just for a breath. But here's the real surprise. Revelation doesn't come from above or beyond. It comes from underneath everything you've been using to distract yourself. It rises when the noise falls. The moment you stop trying to experience something profound is the moment something profound finally has room to reach you. And this isn't mystical, it's perceptual. Soon you'll see how this prepares you for the next shift. So stay close, because the next chapter shows what happens when the world finally speaks back, when the ordinary reveals itself without waiting for your permission. There's a moment, subtle, almost invisible, when something inside you shifts. Not dramatically,
Not like an awakening in a movie, but like a quiet click you almost didn't hear. And if you stay with me, you'll recognize it sooner than you think. It often starts with something ordinary catching your attention for no clear reason. A shadow, a sound, the way light falls on a surface. Nothing meaningful on the outside, but something feels different inside, as if the moment is looking back at you. Your mind tries to explain it, of course. It's just a light. I'm tired. I'm overthinking. But beneath the explanation, there's a tiny pause, a space where your usual inner noise loses a bit of strength. That space is where everything begins. Suddenly, the moment feels thicker, not heavier, just fuller, more saturated. You're not observing it, you're inside it. And even though nothing special is happening, something about it feels strangely right, strangely complete. You don't force this moment. You don't search for it. It arrives on its own, like a breath you forgot you were holding. And when it arrives, it softens your face, loosens your shoulders, slows your mind. It reminds you of something you've been missing. What you feel isn't excitement, it's presence, a groundedness that makes the world feel closer to you, almost intimate. And the simplicity of it might surprise you, but trust me, that's the whole point. The sacred never needs spectacle. In these moments, the boundaries between you and the moment blur. It's no longer you looking at a cup, or a wall, or a beam of light. It's the moment revealing itself without asking for interpretation. You receive it without effort, and that's why it feels so different. Even your breath shifts. You inhale a little deeper, exhale a little slower, as if your body recognizes the truth before your thoughts do. This is why revelation feels physical long before it becomes conceptual. And then comes the part you can't predict. The small surge of clarity, not a thought, not a conclusion, but a recognition. I've been asleep. And it doesn't hurt you. It frees you. It opens a doorway that was always in the room, but never in your awareness. You realize the moment didn't change. You did. Your perception unclenched. Your attention expanded. And suddenly the ordinary world feels like it's been waiting for you this whole time. And believe me, this realization is only the beginning. Because once you notice this shift, even once, you can't unsee it. And the next chapter reveals why you never saw it before, and why it's been trying to reach you for years.
You've had these moments available your whole life, but you never recognized them for what they were. And there's a reason for that. One you may not like at first, but will make perfect sense once you sit with it. You were always too busy running toward the next moment to actually inhabit the one you were in. Not out of arrogance, but survival. You thought speed would protect you, but speed only blinds you to what's already here. The ordinary never felt meaningful because you were constantly comparing it to an imagined better reality, a future version of yourself, a future breakthrough, a future feeling, and nothing real can compete with something idealized. Your mind has been trained to expect revelation as a reward for effort, like a prize you earn after enough struggle. But revelation doesn't work like that. It shows up when effort loses its grip, not when it tightens. You also didn't see it because you learned to distrust stillness. Stillness feels unproductive, unsafe, too exposed. So you fill the silence with noise, internal or external, just to avoid being in contact with yourself. But here's the part you never realized. That avoidance costs you clarity. Another reason you miss these moments is that you always looked for emotional intensity. You wanted thunder, not whisper, epiphany, not presence. But the sacred rarely shouts. It opens quietly and only if you're not drowning it out. And then there's the hardest truth. You were too identified with your thoughts to notice anything outside them.
Thought became the lens, the narrator, the filter. Everything passed through interpretation, and interpretation kills immediacy. But don't worry, this is where things begin to shift. Your nervous system also learned to stay on alert. Hypervigilance keeps you alive, but it also keeps you from seeing beauty. You were too focused on what could go wrong to notice what was quietly right in front of you. And maybe the most painful reason you never saw it is this. You didn't believe you were allowed to feel something sacred in your ordinary life. You thought meaning had to be earned, proven, deserved. But revelation never cared about your worthiness, only your openness. But now that you've felt the shift, even once, it becomes harder to return to your old way of seeing. Something inside you is awake, even if quietly. And believe me, the next chapter will show you what happens the moment this awareness deepens. Stay with me, we're getting close to the heart of it.
You keep thinking the sacred is something rare, a moment reserved for the enlightened, the disciplined, the spiritually advanced. But now you know better. The sacred isn't distant, it's patient. It's been waiting for you in places so simple you stopped looking. The truth is that the sacred doesn't arrive, it reveals. And it reveals itself in the exact moment you stop trying to make life perform for you. When the demand drops, the moment opens, and the ordinary becomes impossibly alive. There is a softness in reality you were never taught to notice, a gentleness in the way light falls, in the way silence holds a room, in the way your breath reconnects you to your body. None of this was ever out of reach. You were just out of rhythm. When you finally see it, everything feels strangely familiar, like remembering a language you forgot you knew. And if you pay attention, you'll feel a warmth in the recognition, almost like the moment is welcoming you back. You realize the sacred was never something to chase, it was something to receive, something that appears naturally when your perception loosens, when the mind unclutters, when the world no longer has to compete with your expectations. And here's the part that catches most people by surprise. Nothing extraordinary needs to happen for the sacred to show itself. A cup, a shadow, a single breath, a quiet room. These things don't change. You do. The sacred doesn't overwhelm, it invites. It approaches slowly, without force, without spectacle. And if you're patient enough, you begin to feel how close it has always been. Closer than your thoughts, closer than your anxieties, closer than your name. You begin to understand why revelation doesn't depend on scenery. It depends on attention, on the willingness to let the moment be as it is, without demanding it to be meaningful. That acceptance is the doorway you've been avoiding. Because the moment you stop chasing meaning, meaning steps forward. The moment you stop escaping the ordinary reveals its depth. And the moment you stop resisting presence, presence becomes undeniable. And now you see what was invisible for years. The sacred isn't outside your life. It's inside your gaze. What you call ordinary was always a doorway, and now that you've walked through it, nothing looks the same. Stay with this, because once you see the sacred in front of you, you begin to see it everywhere. And the world you return to is no longer the one you left.
If this moved something inside you, stay. We're building something for those who don't fake it. Subscribe, not just for the content, but for the confrontation. And if this left a wound, maybe it was meant to. Sometimes the best way to go deeper is to share the pain. Share it. Most people rush back to their lives unchanged. They forget what they felt, as if the moment never happened. But if something opened in you, even slightly, don't ignore it. There's a kind of clarity that only appears once and disappears the moment you pretend you didn't feel it. Maybe today, the world didn't become different, maybe you did. Hold that, even if it's fragile, even if it's small. Sometimes the shift is not a revelation, it's a responsibility. The responsibility to not go back to sleep,